Hi, and welcome back. If you're in the world of coaching or personal transformation, you've likely heard the name Steve Chandler. Steve's impact as an author, teacher, mentor is really difficult to overstate. He has written over 40 books and he has inspired the lives of thousands of people around the globe, entrepreneurs, leaders, coaches. He's known for his humor and his humility and his ability to cut through complexity and get to the heart of the matter. And today's conversation is no different. It's a special one for me because Steve showed up in my life when I was at a pivotal moment in my own career, and his teaching at that time sticks with me still today. In this episode, you're going to hear us explore what it really means to move beyond old patterns and to live from the deeper dimension and creative nature of who we are within. Steve shares how him hitting rock bottom in his own life was really the catapult for seeing where real transformation comes from and how that shifted everything, not only for his own life, but ultimately for the leaders and organizations and people that he's worked with today. We talk about creativity, alignment, the role of humor, and why most of what we think matters actually doesn't matter. Steve's stories and wisdom throughout this whole conversation are refreshing, down to earth, and of course, profound. If you've ever wondered how to shift your work, your life, your behavior, how to have more impact, then today's conversation is going to leave you feeling lighter, inspired, and a little less concerned, I think, about getting it right. So enjoy, let's settle in. I think you're really going to love this one. Thank you, as always, for being here. Steve, thank you so much for being here. I'm really grateful to be with you. It feels like a big treat and a great way to start off my day. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, I met you in person. It was 2011. And I was living in Paris at the time, and you were teaching a course in London with Rich Litvin. I was still working executive inside a company, but had started to feel the nudge to leave and create my own business, go back out on my own again. And your course, I had come across you through Michael Neal. I didn't know Michael yet. I was getting ready to start working with him, but you and he have done a lot together, and he speaks so highly of you. And so that weekend, I just want to say, was such I don't know whether to call it just a affirmation, a confidence boost, a recognition, a resonance that inner nudge was where I was meant to be. Your style of teaching, your coaching, the wisdom you shared were just so beneficial. I walked away from that knowing I was on the right path. And that was so much of what I think the way you showed up in that, you and Rich. So thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like I wish I had been there.
You would have loved it. Yeah. You would have laughed. You would have cried. It was amazing. Well, I would love to just dive right in and ask you, as you know, the work we do is similar in some ways, but you're known as the godfather of coaching. I am not known as the godmother, even though I've been doing it since like the 90s. But I'm curious for you, when did you first realize that it was the internal that was shaping what was happening externally? That, maybe it was an aha moment or a realization, something that helped you begin to make that relationship.
I think that happened at first for me a long time ago when I went through recovery from drugs and alcohol. And it was, I had just made a total mess of my life. Any possible catastrophe, bankruptcy, divorce, everything. And huge amount of financial debt. I really was at a loss. I had no career. I had no ambition. I had no goals. And I went through this program as a final desperation move. And it was a spiritual program of recovery. It was a 12-step program. And I had no reference point for spirituality. In fact, it was really bizarre because even though I'd made a total mess of my life, I had this kind of arrogance about spirituality. Here I was, desperate, broken, needing help, walking into this room. And they told me about this program where it involved a lot of meditation. It involved finally arriving at conscious contact with a higher power to give you a different kind of spirit than the spiritual relief you thought you were getting from drugs and alcohol. And I began to argue with it. And arrogantly, I thought I was intellectually superior to any kind of spiritual concepts. I thought they were either really old fashioned and all kinds of debunked myths, or they were new age woo woo. And so I argued against it. And finally, I had a sponsor compassionate enough to just hang in there with me. And he just laughed every time I made my points in the meetings and argued. And something finally broke, and I began listening to Alan Watts. Someone suggested, if you don't want a particular spiritual orientation where it involves a lot of belief in mythology or gurus, listen to this guy. So 24/7, I was listening to Alan Watts tapes, cassettes, audios, and all of a sudden, I just saw life differently. My whole worldview shifted. And it occurred to me that my description of life, my interpretation of life, my ideas about what was causing my problems were all internally based. They were all being created by my own thinking. And that was a shock to me, and I didn't know what to do with that. But that was the starting point. That really opened me up. So now I had become excited, and I began to look into all kinds. I began reading day and night, reading Colin Wilson. I found George Pransky, and way before there was any kind of 3P movement, he never talked about 3P. He had these cassettes about how to go into business and talk to business people, and I listen to them all the time, and they harmonize. I see now, looking back, why they did when I learned much later about Sydney Banks, but they harmonized with Alan Watts. And so one thing led to another, and it's just been ever expanding since then. But that was the key opening for me right
Yeah.
there.
And how would you articulate that, seeing your spiritual nature, or how would you even say that? Would you say it that way? How did that begin to shift the way you moved in the world, or help you with the addiction? Or
Well, it gave me a replacement for the addiction. It gave me a path to follow through meditation and self-inquiry and meeting with people regularly, going to meetings. And then I moved music into it because music had been a previous big part of my life. And somehow I was able to integrate music in that. And that just opened me up. And I was able to see that the more of that was integrated in my life, the less I felt like a victim of outside circumstances. And the biggest insight I got was that anytime I had frustration, fear, worry, doubt, upset, I could trace it to some story I'd created. I could trace it to a description of what was happening as opposed to what was really happening. And I saw a different causation of my trouble, and it was internal. It was not external anymore. And somehow I stumbled into a company that was doing seminars for corporations. And I thought, as I saw these corporate people so upset about things, external things, I saw that if they could see the role of their own thinking in this, it would make their life in the world a lot easier, a lot clearer. They'd have access to their creativity and intuition, and they'd relax a little bit more. They wouldn't take themselves as seriously, and be able to enjoy their work. So I began to integrate what I saw, and I got an opportunity to start teaching it to companies. And for some reason, they loved it and kept inviting me back.
Yeah. Well, I can obviously, relate to that story in the sense of, I had done a lot of learning. I love to learn and all of that. And the psychology of who we are, why we are, personality, behaviors, all of that. And then my spirituality was sort of in the lane of, I'd go do some cool retreats every once in a while, but it was never like this integrated thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started to see thought, as you're saying, the role that my own storytelling, my own believing, everything I thinking was generating a lot of my own discomfort and confusion and upset. It was one of those kind of humbling moments where I was like, oh, geez, I am on my mind way more than I realize, and it was like, if I don't have to manage it all, that's where the integration happens. Wait, we have something else going for us, this deeper dimension of who we are in our lives. And it was that integration of knowing, like, yeah, it's not all on me to manage, that helped me as well. I'm curious what you would add to that, Steve.
Yeah, I had the very same experience, and it was experiential. It wasn't new information or theory. It really was real, and it really was experiential. That the more I could slow down and relax and let go of self-obsession, thoughts about me, and see the real nature of thought, see these random thoughts are just cosmic events. They're just disturbances in consciousness. They're not to be taken seriously. It freed me up. It gave me space. Spirituality is a strange word because it means something different to every person you say the word to. But it's just kind of a placeholder word for whatever that is, the energy of the universe that is available to us if we open up to how we were when we were toddlers, in a sense of wonder and possibility. Little kids, they just don't have boundaries about what they can do or think or say. And then we get programmed and conditioned and we contract, or I did anyway, into the narrowest possible version of me that I thought was making me safe. And when I found out that could be deleted and expanded, that was really exciting.
Yeah. What do you mean when you say it made you safe? Can you say a little bit more about
Well,
that?
when I looked back, what is this personality, so-called permanent, ongoing, linear, tangible personality that I've created and I defend and refine, all this self-improvement, go building up? What is this? Where did it come from? And why did I do it? What role does it play? And I saw that it was a way to keep myself safe from embarrassment, keep myself out of jail. It was a way to play a role that would get me in the least amount of trouble emotionally. And it was just, how many barriers and boundaries can I put up to the experience of life so I don't have to feel things? And so in the teenage years, it was avoidance of embarrassment. Can I wear the right clothes? Can I hang out with the right people? Can I say the right things? And what's popular now? And how can I be cool? And it was all safety, being safe from life itself, which is insane.
Yeah.
We're given the gift of life, and then we try to make it better or safer or less exciting.
Yeah, I resonate. Like every part of me is like, yeah, me too. Raise my hand. And I love the reason I love that you use the word safety is because, when you talked earlier about kind of intellectual superiority, I kind of had that around, this idea that, oh no, I'm comfortable. I'm confident. I don't struggle with insecurity except in one area, like it just kind of, and realizing I heard you, Sydney Banks, on a tape one time say that underneath every disturbed mind is an insecure thought.
Mm.
And when I got open to that,
Yeah.
I realized, similar to what you're saying, it's like, wow, I've made my world really small because I don't want to feel certain things. What if it was okay to feel?
Yeah.
What if it was okay? Like I was obsessed in my 20s and probably most of my 30s about finding my purpose and not realizing that by letting go of what you're describing as those walls, those borders and ideas about ourselves as being fixed, if we can question those and they fall away, you're naturally accessing more potential. You're actually stepping into new expression. But I couldn't do that. It was like I desired it so much, but I was like a hostage to my own
Yeah.
thinking about myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how has that shown up for you professionally?
By magic. It hasn't shown up professionally in a way that I can go back and make look intentional. And it's just a sense of wonder that the freer I become, to be honest and direct with myself and with others, and the freer I become to be lighthearted about situations in life, the more creative my partnerships are with clients, the more we create and brainstorm together instead of just empathize about how bad things are. And it just kind of happens on its own. I wish I had a formula for it. I've tried to write a lot of books that point to it the best way I can. And it looks like, hey, do this, don't do that. Self-help. If you do this, you'll have a better life. But it's just a wild attempt. I don't know. Some of it lands and some of it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, I know you've written a number of books, and I would love to talk about that creative process for you. But also in the book Creator, I think it was that, or I also recently listened to you and Chris Nelson when you released The Very Best of Steve Chandler book. And you talked about, when we put our power in the problem versus the power in creativity. And I think that's like even hearing you two talk about it, like it struck me again. It's like that orientation is what I hear in what you're saying right now. Would you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah. What I discovered, and I was a songwriter for 5 years, and before that in college, I was a published poet and I was writing poems, and I've always loved creativity, but I always thought it was a real narrow part of life. It was just like, I've got this little compartment called creativity, and I have a certain creative capacity in this area. But the rest of my life, I'm just battling all of the difficulties and the problems. And I was giving so much power to the problems. I was making the problems so important. And I had a coach at the time who helped me see what would happen was I would go to him with a problem. He was a life coach. And I would say, here's my latest problem. I had a list of problems. And I'd come in and I had so many problems. Financial, relationship, parenting problems. I had full custody of 4 children. So I had more problems than he would ever have time for. And so he would say, I would describe the problem, and he would say, okay, and he would just say it back to me as a neutral situation. He would neutralize the problem. Okay, this is the situation. Given this situation, what would you like to create? He wouldn't say, how do we solve this problem? He would turn the spotlight of awareness back to my inherent creativity, which everybody has. All children have it. They paint, they sing, they dance, they without hesitation. And grown-ups don't. They just think, oh no, I'm not a good this, I'm not good at that, I'm not good enough to do that. And he would say, given this situation, what would you like to create? And I said, well, we got to go over there and solve that problem because it's messing with my life. And he'd say, that's just a situation. That's just the playing field. That's the canvas we can paint on. There's nothing inherently wrong or overwhelming or unfair or about this thing. It's just a thing that arose. What would you like to create? And if it were created, this would no longer be relevant to you. And so he kept doing that with every problem. He saw each problem as a kind of improv setup. Like, we're all doing improv on the stage. And here's your situation. Now be funny or be creative use your imagination. Don't drop down into this sad victim state, this role you play as a martyr that you've cultivated to get sympathy from people and to join them in their moaning and their hand wringing and tearing their hair out about how unfair everything is. Leave that behind. That's in your past. That didn't work for you. The role, playing that role, got you to where you are. So let's leave that. That's a stage in your development. That didn't work. We're good. Let's move on. And let's create as the go-to, as your response to whatever arises. And I began to practice that in life. And I began to teach it in corporations. You can be a creator or you can be a reactor. You can react to this situation of low earnings and we've lost some people. You can react and feel bad about it, and or we can create a response to it that works. And let's get over here. And when people are creating, they are in a much better mood. Their energy rises. The nature of life changes. It can be practiced and cultivated. It's just a habit of where you come from in the face of what life offers you as your next improv opportunity. So that's how it got into life for me. And that's when I wrote. I like to challenge myself with books. How can you possibly write a book about creativity? And nobody knows how to teach creativity or something, but why don't you give it a try? And maybe you can reveal to people that they are born creative. Nobody's inherently more creative than anyone else. We just talk ourselves into those really safe little narrow caricatures or little action figures that we play roles.
Yeah. And I think that, a while ago, I remember laughing at myself because I realized I had started to paint this picture of where I was actually a victim of my habitual thinking. Now, it wasn't that linear or precise, but I really saw what you're saying. It's like, oh, wow, I think I'm up against habit. Like now I've turned my habit of mind into something I have to overcome. That's exhausting, so that tweak again, where you've learned in a very powerful way to say, okay, that's just what is now. What wants to come forward? What wants to evolve? And I think in our business, our life, that opportunity, that is always available. Whatever's there, if we look at it through the lens of what does it want to show me about who I am, not what I did wrong, not how I could have done it better, right? Which is, a trap I think we can fall into, trying to not repeat it. But it's this idea of what's it waking up in me? What's it evolving in me?
Yeah, right. That's good. And thanks to Byron Katie, somewhere along the way, I got intoxicated with her system and her books. And I went to her 9-day school, which was total immersion in noticing thought for what is noticing that you don't have to believe a thought when it arises, that you can change your entire relationship to thoughts and not identify with them as that's me thinking. That's just a thought arising to me. And when I had that breakthrough or whatever it was, I was able to see that it isn't my habit or my thinking, that my ego would always try to own everything and claim it to be me. And it wasn't me and it wasn't mine. It was just arising to me. And it sounds like just wordplay or semantic, but it's a very big difference that when I can notice a pattern, a habit of victim thinking, it's no longer me. Because I can't be it and noticing it at the same time. So it's kind of like a train. If you see a train leaving a station, a train of thought, if you can see a pattern of thought that you've been having, you're not on that train. If I'm on the platform watching a train leave the station, I'm not on that train. If I'm seeing a pattern of thought, that's a pattern of thought, but it's not me. So I don't have to identify with it if I don't want to. That's just adding something to it that doesn't need to be added. And that kind of position of neutrality to all thought was another breakthrough along the way for me that just gave me so much freedom to not have thoughts automatically trigger the entire nervous system by me velcroing to the thought and saying, oh, this is me, or that's a premonition, or that's the truth about life. No, it's just a static on the screen. I don't have to attach any kind of heavy meaning to it. It's just a thought. It's a trial balloon, and I can do with it whatever I want, including they're all helium balloons. Let them go. Let them just go.
Yeah. And I appreciate that, what you're saying. It can feel sort of, I don't know, like, why are we talking about this? I've got work to do. I got a business to create. I've got a relationship to repair. But that connection between my nervous system isn't in overdrive here, or I can see thought, that means at the same time I have more perspective, and that perspective comes with fresh thinking, new ideas, wisdom versus just reaction and autopilot. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And coming back to the creativity and the writing piece, I know, what is your take on, like, I would call you a prolific writer. I know others have. Your books have inspired me, woke me up to things. I've shared them with clients. I know a lot of people, and I'm just curious how you see your writing. And you started to speak to a little bit, but how you see that channel as a vehicle of expression and how you show up to writing.
Well, for it to work, for it to keep flowing after I wrote my first book, I had to not make a big deal out of the fact that I am an author writing books. I had to recognize it was another form of talking to people. That's all it was. Just like I can send you an email, I can leave you a voicemail, I can write you a little book. It's not as big a deal as people think. And when I hear people say, you've written 40 books, you're just so creative and prolific, that's their story about it, and they make that up about me. I don't experience it that way myself. I'm in the middle of another book right now, and I'm not thinking, the author has just awakened, he's gone to the bathroom, and he will now make his coffee and move into his writing quarters and author another book. And the author's wife is asking for his time. She doesn't respect how he needs his space. It's just silliness. It's just ego that gets in the way of creativity. Anytime I make something about me and not about who's going to read it and receive it, it gets in the way of the whole makes a mess out of the whole thing.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like taking ourselves off our mind when we're in
Yeah.
service, whether our conversation or writing. I think that makes sense. But would you describe yourself as sort of, you get an idea and you immediately, like, you get inspired about the book and then you just start? Or how do you know when to follow those and when not to? I would imagine you get a lot of creative ideas or thoughts about what you could do.
Yeah, I just, so it's a little bit like I want to make it as blue collar a process as I can in the actual creation of the book. I don't want to take the magic out of when you get a great idea and the inspiration, but I want to show up for work. And so it's like in college you get an essay exam. And I would never raise my hand and say, I'm not feeling it today. I have writer's block. I need to come back and take it another day. You just write. You just fill the page. And so I wanted to have the process be that simple, like doing the dishes and taking the garbage out and writing the next chapter. I've got a chapter to write. And so I would use little mental tricks to take the self-inflated drama, the me, out of the process. So I would pretend I was writing an email to a friend. And I had this friend, Fred. I say, okay, creativity. Here's an example of how my children were naturally creative. I just saw it in them. And so I saw that the creative expression from human beings is very normal and natural. It isn't a specialized, celebrated, marvelous thing at all. It's just expression. And so I would just write it like this is my essay exam for the day. And I'll just write it like if you're writing an email about something, if I got an email from you, Barb, and you said, tell me what you think creativity is or where it comes from, I wouldn't say I'm not feeling it. I got to wait to be inspired. I'm pacing in the forest and taking notes. I would just say, oh, my hands would start moving. And I try to explain it the best way I can. So I would do that when I would write a chapter. And then I'd look at it later and say, does this seem to say what I want? If it doesn't, I'll change it a little bit. But it's not some wondrous magical thing for me. It's just show up, put it on the page, see how it looks, show Chris Nelson. He's such a beautiful editor. He's a poet himself and a songwriter and a wordsmith. So he adds so much. I send it to him. What do you think? He says, I would change that. I would move that paragraph to the front. Okay.
Yeah. 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 I love the idea that, like, oh yeah, in an email, I would just go for it. Or
Yeah.
yeah, I remember I was wanting to start a newsletter and write blogs, and Rohini Ross and I were teaching this program, a 30-day engaged space thing. On it, we would get online and people would ask questions and we'd type answers, and you're just doing this really fast and comes. And then I was sharing with Rohini, I'm like, yeah, I just get this like block, this mental block when I have to think about what would I say and how would I say it. And she's like, Barb, you writing a blog every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I was like, oh yeah, I am. It's how I'm holding it. I've turned it into, it's a trick of the mind that it's
Yeah.
something other than just writing.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
The trick of the mind that I'm important, this is important, it better sound good.
Yeah.
How can it be any different than what everyone else is already writing? All these thoughts get in the way of natural creativity.
Yeah. And I'm curious, it makes me think about like flow and alignment. And there's a lot out there. And I know I've thought about this for myself. Like you said, am I aligned with my ego, or am I aligned with like who I want to serve, just as an example? Or am I trying to prove myself or be credible here? Or am I just speaking it like it looks to me, like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what you think about alignment in general, and then what its relationship, if any, to like flow and when things seem to just be rolling, whether it's writing or it's in your work or your business?
Am I overthinking? Do I have too much agenda? Am I trying to be the manager of what's happening? Or am I allowing expression to come through me? Am I forcing it? Or am I getting in alignment with a power greater than myself? So when people are dancing freely, they're not trying to get from this part of the dance floor to the other, and I'm going to make 3 moves with my hands, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have my feet moonwalk for here, and then I'm going to go. It's just getting with me, allowing the music to come through your body. Um, so alignment for me is allowing alignment, natural alignment to occur, not trying to make an alignment or create an alignment or overthink alignment, but just notice alignment occurs when I don't try to make it occur.
Yeah, note. I'm taking notes. Yeah, don't thingify alignment is kind of another way I hear, right?
That's right. Yeah, don't
Yeah,
make a big thing out of it. Don't,
yeah.
because that's what gets in the way of compassion and creativity is trying to make a thing of it, trying to own it, label it, make a thing of it, do it more, get better at it. And that's where the mind comes in, or the ego, whatever you want to call the little tiny homunculus, the imaginary figure living in the cranium trying to run the show. That is a non-entity. That doesn't even exist, but we have dreamed it up and we give it all power, and at least I do, and it tries to run a show, and it has no power and it has no ability. And that's where the writer gets so frustrated, or the person in a relationship gets so frustrated. I'm trying to make this relationship better and make it work. And like George Pransky used to say, get over yourself. Let it work. Don't make it work.
Yeah, George used to say to me, well, I don't really, he called me out one time on stepping on his heels. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, I just feel like you're always like, come on, come on. And as soon as he said, I was like, yeah, sorry, that's me. And he goes, well, I don't really care. I just don't want you to think you're onto something. Like, point. I get it. I get it. Yeah. And so I have 2 questions in my mind, but one of them is how to share a story, a personal example of when sort of you knew it was time to pivot in your own work and what that was.
Well, there was one point at which I had a number of clients who were very ambitious, and I had gotten good at helping people in businesses and people who were solopreneurs and coaches and consultants make more money. And I noticed at one point, I remember sitting back right in this office, if you could call it an office. If they took a camera in here, they would not call it an office. They would call it Animal House or something. But it hit me. My ego is in the business of inflating other egos. Do I want to keep doing that? Is that what I want to do? Because I noticed, and my clients noticed, it's never enough. So I want to double my income this year. Okay, let's go about it. Let's look at the systems. My latest book is about systems, not psychology, was the original title. And let's create a system that would have that happen, and let's follow the system. It just got, and then the client would be, okay, next year, what are we going to do? I've already done this. What are other worlds to conquer? Because I'm not feeling fulfilled. I could tell my clients were really no happier, no better off spiritually, if you want to bring that word in, than they were at the start of last year, even though out in the world, their name ID, their personal branding, their notoriety was greater, their income was higher. But so what? And I thought, I'm an ego this ego is pumping up other egos. Do I want to do that for a living? No, I don't. So I began to select clients differently based on what they really wanted to work on. And I began working with people like Tina, for example, Tina Quinn, who had this beautiful spiritual nature and open heart. And she was a wonderful coach. And she learned how to get clients and make money, but she was up to a much more beautiful game of life than that. So I began to choose clients differently and do different level of work.
Yeah. Yeah. And does that mean prior to that, knowing how much the recognition of your spiritual nature and having your own personal relationship to that, which is within you, changed your life? Does that mean prior to that, it wasn't showing up in your work, or you just sort of put that front and center?
Well, my cover story was I was meeting the client where they were and I was committing to what they wanted to commit to. That was my cover story. And yeah, it would show up here and there. And yes, when the client in pursuit of a greed-based worldly goal hit a wall with a relationship or existential internal crisis, we would go there and it would be really fulfilling. So it was occurring, but not as my central idea of what I really wanted to do. It was occurring. There was work more. George Pransky used to call it living life, the vertical line, versus the game of life, which is the linear line, the game of life, one damn thing after another in the world of achievement. In the outer world, both of these, the vertical and the horizontal, most coaches, and me included, would meet a client on the horizontal line. Okay, what do you want to create out in the world? What problems do you want to solve? And let's go there and let's leave this vertical ascension. Let's just leave that in the background. Let's leave that to the gurus in Tibet and the people in California. And you and I will work in the real world. And I finally, that the cover was blown, and I just thought, I'm not really helping if that's all I help people do.
Yeah. Amen. Yes, me too. And getting more and more unapologetic that that's where I think the true potential sits for us all, that sort of level of conversation and awakening. But as you know, I've worked with businesses and corporations and entrepreneurs as well. And I do think that, I like the way you're saying it, like really challenge that thought that somehow meeting them there is necessary. Like I think anytime, and I did it in my one-on-one work for a long time, but in the more public, I'm going to go work with the team, I'm going to, talk about what I do, I was way more careful about it. And you're right. It just robs the joy out of it. Also, it's so, flat. It falls flat. Did that feel like a big leap in regards to how it impacted your business, Steve, or did it just naturally?
It surprisingly helped my business. There was a lot more renewal and referral occurring because a lot of clients, if they have a certain goal and they reach the goal, they're done with the coach. Thanks. This is fine.
Yeah.
But when we're both growing together and the skies becomes the limit, who wants to stop that process? So I would find clients would just say, can we go another year? I said, yeah, okay. Because I'm just getting started. I feel better than I've ever felt, but I feel like I'm just getting started. All right, let's go.
Yeah.
So it took it off that flat line of achievement only, and it went into a deeper and a higher domain, a different dimension of what's possible for a human being.
Yeah. And so is it when you're thinking about how you and maybe you're in a different chapter in your life as well, and this isn't on your mind as much. But when you're thinking about how you let people know, what you do or what working with you is like, do you now make sure it includes that, or is that even too much thought?
Yeah, I don't. I let that arise in the conversation. When someone wants to work with me, we talk, and I get a feeling of whether I'm only a coach, I'm not a life-saving paramedic or a psychiatrist who, people who have a real obligation to hang in there with whatever is going on. I can choose who I work with. And so I can choose who would be fun to work with. And when I see that people are open and it feels like they have some courage or they have an intuition that there is a dimension of consciousness that they know is there intuitively. They don't have a way of describing it. I don't either. I try to describe it, but it arises in the initial conversations and we decide to keep going. And if I get the other thing, if I get just, I want to crush it. I had one woman contact me and say, I want you to teach me how to be a badass woman in the world. And I just had to confess that was not part of my skill set. She needs to look elsewhere. I said, I recommend you find a badass woman and have her show you how she did it, but I'm not your person.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, and again, that comes back to even what you were saying earlier, like how do we just allow and trust
Yeah,
what's there? And, we aren't creating the dance in our mind before we do it. We're just sort of dancing and resonating and following that. Yeah. And also in that clarity comes like, I may not be the right one for you.
that's right.
I just want to talk about humor for a minute because, like, some of my first memories of you are like just laughing out loud. And that self deprecation I love, and I'm just curious, like, how you've seen humor as a resource, not just maybe for your own life and work, but also in your work with others or your teaching.
I think when people are laughing, the ego is gone and they're a child again. And their heart is so open in that moment of laughter that when that opening occurs, if there's a principle you want to point to for them to see, the opening is so much bigger after a good laugh than it is when we're getting serious together. Self-deprecation, I hear people describe that. It comes so easy to me. There's so much to deprecate. It's a gold mine of deprecation. It just comes easy. And one woman in a course raised her hand and said, "How are you so humble?" And I was just stunned. And what's the alternative? The alternative to what she's perceiving as humble would be the most phony and fake bravado anyone has ever seen. It would be so inauthentic that I would just be creeped out after every talk I gave or every session I gave, because I would just have to be so deliberately phony to try to present myself as someone who had their act together at all times, or someone who knows how to live life
Yeah.
and can teach it. That's just absurd.
Yeah. Thank God we don't have to have it all figured out to be able to help other people.
I don't have
I
anything.
wouldn't be able to do anything, right?
I have
Yeah.
less figured out now than I ever did.
So true. It's so true. I remember, and I don't know if you'll recall this, and if not, we can skip over it, but just that moment of, you're right. There's something so beautiful in like that moment of vulnerability and laughter and recognition and openness. And when I was working with Michael, I was an apprentice of his, and you taught at one of the coaching weekends. And you were telling a story about your kids at a really rough moment with, and then you started chanting a movie scene. Do you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah, I do.
Would you mind
Yeah.
sharing that story?
Their mother had a brain disorder and had been institutionalized, had been taken away in a police van with a straitjacket on that the kids had to look out the window and watch. And their mother had not been around a lot. She had a dissociative disorder and would just disappear for days at a time. So they didn't have I was parenting anyway, full time, and they had been watching. We watched a lot of fun movies, and we watched Bill Murray's movie Meatballs a lot. I mean, when the kids liked a movie, they would want to put it on over and over. And there's a scene in the movie where Bill Murray's talking. He's at a camp of kids, and his kids that he's a camp counselor for are the kind of down and out kids that are poor, and they're in this little Olympics against the camp across the lake where the rich kids are. And they're all real athletic, and they're winning this Olympics. And Bill Murray gives this inspirational talk about how they've got all the privilege and their lives are going to go easy and all that. And after he lists all their advantages, he keeps yelling to the kids, but it just doesn't matter. And then finally the kids start taking up the chant, it just doesn't matter. So when their mother was taken away, the next morning I woke up and I heard this chanting, and one of the kids was hitting a pot with a spoon, and they were marching around the house, and they all four little children, and they were saying, "We have no mother anymore. We're stuck with our dad, but it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter." And at one point, one of my daughters said, "And our dad does not know what he's doing." But it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And they just kept chanting that. And it sort of became a theme of the rest of our raising of the kids and trying to live, that when something difficult would come up, like I had all these debts, there were times when they would shut down the power in the house. And they'd call me at work and say, "Dad, the lights aren't on in the house." And I'd say, "Oh, yeah." And they'd say, "We know it just doesn't matter. But we'd like to have the lights and stuff." And I'd say, "Well, yeah, that's the power company has a problem. I'll fix that." And I'd drive over and pay the power bill. And so that became our theme. Something would come up and they'd say, "This is happening, but it just doesn't matter." And they remember it now. They're all adults, and they laugh about our times, but they still live with that theory that doesn't matter, whatever happens.
So beautiful. What a really wonderful memory. And that story just struck me. And I think and I, would think about that over the years. And I think I heard that 12 plus years ago. And I think it is that. It's what we said. It's like, what I think matters just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just open up to coming back to what we said before, the creator, putting the power in the creator and in what wants to evolve and who we are beyond all that thinking, and allow that to inform where we go versus all the other. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Steve. So I just want two more questions. One is, you mentioned your book, The Power of Systems, and I really, it's a great book. I highly recommend it. And I think it's a really powerful piece around, as you said, when something's not working, I know I have a habit of looking at my psychology. What's the reason why? What am I doing? How do I overcome that? Does it mean I'm on the right path or not? Like, right and wrong can tie me up for days and I won't even see it sometimes, right? And yet you were saying, no, look neutrally and just look at the systems. And I'm curious if you could create one system that everyone just had to do that would benefit their work or life, what system would you put in place or create for people?
Well, I just finished a book about it. It's called The Power of Love. And the system would be notice the power of love all around you. Don't confuse it with the Hallmark movie you just saw, where, someone has a breakup and all of her friends gather around her and they say, "We know you'll find love again someday," as if that's the only place love exists in a relationship with another so-called soulmate. And if you don't find that, you're out of luck. Love, you are living a loveless life without Hallmark love or love songs or things like that, or poor Taylor Swift, who has had such trouble with love and has put her heart in the songs. She's very talented at describing what it is to get lost in your own thoughts about what you think love is. And that would be the system of noticing. Be aware of where you see it in your little dog, or the way that the flowers come up again this year, how the tree bends, just wherever. If you start noticing it, use the system of awareness and noticing where love is and how powerful it is when it shows up.
Beautiful. I look forward to reading the book, but I'm going to take on that challenge now. Thank you for that. Thank you.
I am too.
Then the final question is from someone we both know and love, Isla Coates. And Isla, when I was just thinking about our conversation, I reached out to Isla and I said, "Hey, Isla, I'm talking to Steve. What's one," because she knows you pretty well, right? You guys have worked together for years. I'm like, what's one thing you would like Steve to answer? And so here's her question. She said, "What's the biggest insights, life-changing or business-changing you've had by tuning into people like Rupert Spira or Sydney Banks?"
I don't have to worry about anything my mind tells me. That's the insight I've had. I don't have to take my thoughts seriously. I don't have to take what I make something mean, the importance I give something. I don't have to take any of that as truth. I can relax and open myself I can trust the universe.
Beautiful.
And I can practice doing it. I don't have to believe in it. You were, in some of your notes ahead of time, you asked about belief. What belief have you let go of? I've let go of as many beliefs as I can. The fewer beliefs I'm grasping and clinging to, the happier I am. So that would be it.
Yeah.
That's a good example of not being able to say very well what you mean and still calling yourself an author.
Yeah, but it's received, and I think what was just striking me in that is it's so counterintuitive to maybe the way we've all been, and yet it's so freeing.
It's the opposite of what we're taught.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I could keep you on for another hour, but I won't do that to you. But I'm so grateful. And, I'm really going to take to heart the looking for love. And when I think about today, I'll think about you and just how generously you always show up. And I look forward to our next conversation and just thank you.
Good. I do too. Thank you.
As always, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean a lot to us if you could take a moment to first subscribe and follow wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Hitting the follow button means you'll never miss a show. All you have to do is hit the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you like what you're hearing, we'd appreciate you taking a moment to give us a shout out and review. Most importantly, however, if you know anyone that would benefit from this episode, please pass it along. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about my work, Innerverse Academy, or upcoming events, you can check out my website at barbarapatterson.com. You'll find some great resources, classes, and videos, and a lot more. Thank you again for being here. See you next time.